Check 1 2 1 2. Everybody, all right? Hope hope everybody's having a good Friday night so far. Figured I'd jump on. Hadn't been on in a little while. Figured I'd jump on and talk a little bit about. Obviously, Monday night was the national championship game. I think many of you know. Uh, uh, Probably figure out where number 6 is. Probably don't know if they thought one high stuff with free safety 15 yards deep could keep the ball in front of them. And obviously they're a big 3 deep team. They've even been known to be a spot drop 3 deep team. But I don't know if they thought that they could keep the ball inside and in front playing that structure and hopefully limit big plays. But this is not a championship hat, Chris. This is just it's a standard Alabama hat, but it's now synonymous with championships, unlike FSU hats. So I would, when I look at it, I would think, obviously, you've got a question outside of DeVonta Smith. You don't know if, obviously, they didn't know if if Waddle was going to play, but even if he played, you knew he wasn't going to be 100%. I am going to say, Kareem, I am going to say Packers, although I don't think he's starting, but I wouldn't mind seeing the Rams win because they have a local quarterback from Jacksonville that we played against in high school that started for him last week, but he's not going to start. Jared Goff's going to start, so I'm going to go ahead and say Packers. And obviously, Mechie's a good player. Billingsley's a good player. Forrester's a good player. Najee Harris is a good player, obviously. But I would have possibly taken my chances trying to double or at least have 1.5 over DeVonta Smith everywhere he goes. And I would have took my chances that we could cover Mechie, we could cover Billingsley, we could cover Forrester. If Waddle played, I was going to hope he wouldn't be 100%. And then if Najee Harris is going to carry the ball, carry it 40 times between the tackles, and carry it for 280 yards. But I'll be darned if the Heisman Trophy winner is going to beat me. And it almost looked like they didn't watch film. It almost looked like they had no idea who DeVonta Smith was with some of the things they were doing. So, I don't know. Obviously, unless you're just super talented, I don't know how you would have slowed Alabama down. There's so many different ways that they can attack you. I think that probably even without Landon Dickerson, that probably the thing that goes most unnoticed is how dominant they are, up front with the O-line. As obviously DeVonta Smith's Heisman Trophy winner and deservedly so. He was the best player in college football this year. No argument, in my opinion, at all. Obviously, Najee Harris is a top 2 or 3 running back in the draft. Mac Jones is probably a second-round pick, in my opinion. But, all those things everybody knew about when Waddle's healthy. Those are all the things that you know about. But, to me, that O-line was so good. Anytime they go play action passes, they're running play action passes, pulling a guard 90% of the time to show their run action. And people just don't get near Mac Jones. It's amazing how good they were. Not your old school Alabama game plan where the O-line is that good and they just maul you to death with Sean Alexander or Derrick Henry or, all the backs that they've had in the past. Um, but within that scheme, the offensive line was so physical, so good, schematically, technically so good. I think that gets a little bit, a little bit overlooked, a little bit undervalued because all the other players are so, are so good with that. I think you got to when you got players that are that good, I think you need to bracket and double. I mean, if you Saban and Belichick and all the best guys on defense, they all have game plans where they're going to play, one bracket stuff or one double stuff. I mean, there's no other way when you don't have a guy that can lock that guy up. And you can't, obviously 3 deep isn't the answer. I think you got to take your chances and double somebody and either die a slow death with Najee Harris or, hope that if it is Najee Harris and it's, the weird thing is they did, for the most part, they kept the ball in front of them a bunch. There were some, Alabama drives that were 10 plays plus and eating up some clock. And so, I mean, it wasn't just big play after big play, but, when you're in a national championship game and you have, whether anybody likes it or not, you have almost as many 5 stars as the other team. Whether people like it or not, if you go back and look at stars, rankings, and recruiting ratings, Ohio State has almost as many 5 stars as Alabama does. And you're in a national championship game and guys are open by 8 to 10 yards, running to the front pylon of an end zone by 8 to 10 yards. I mean, that to me is not talent. That to me is not, throw it to a 5-star from a 5-star with 5-star offensive lineman and a 5-star back. That to me is a schematic advantage where, you are doing some things to take advantage of what the defense is doing. And, I thought Sarkisian probably called one of the best games I've seen called in a long time. And this got his hands on some all-22 film from Alabama, and he sent it to me. And obviously, I watched almost every Alabama game this year on TV. But then I went back and watched some of the all-22 stuff. And sure enough, when you go back and watch it, you can go through almost every game and see some of the things that they did in the national championship game they did all season long. The first touchdown that Devontae Smith scores when it's that short orbit motion, play action, and he returns back to the same side and catches the bubble for a touchdown. They ran that to Jalen Waddle versus Missouri. And they did it under center the same way they did it under center against Ohio State. And that's one of the only times, and it was in the low red zone inside the 10-yard line. And it's one of the only times they go under center outside of goal line sneaks or other things like that. So, the more you go back and watch tape and kind of, I went back to watch some of their other games and look at some of the things they were doing. And the more the things they did show up on tape, the more you see the orbit motions and the flat motions and the bubbles and the screens and the floods and, all the things that they were doing were all showing up earlier in the season. And, that just leads me to believe even further, I just wonder what Ohio State and their staff was thinking. It seemed like there were a lot of wrinkles and gadgets and things in there that, made it difficult for, the defense. And when I go back and rewatch all the games that I watch live, I go back and rewatch those on all 22 film and I start to see all those same gadgets, wrinkles, from the same formations being run all season long. So, Alabama stayed true to who they are and what they do. And, it's just, it's just interesting to see how far off somebody was on defense. At the point that the Heisman Trophy voting was already over and you're trying to win a championship, I don't think they were necessarily feeding a wide receiver to win the Heisman. So, just throwing the ball to your Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver, is one thing. If you're throwing it to him to try and pad his stats, that's another thing. But you're throwing it to him and he's open by 8 yards. So, I mean, that's schematically, there's something there. There's something you're doing right and they're doing wrong. And the other reason I wanted to do the video tonight, besides, just talking about the national championship, is going back and looking at how relatable Alabama's offense is. Alabama's offense is probably closer to things we can do in high school than a lot of the offenses I've watched the past couple of years that have been dominant. The LSU stuff last year, the way they threw the ball, the nature of their passing game, I'm not sure that a lot of high schools can do that. Alabama's throwing passes that most they're running ISO theories. They're running pin and pull buck sweep type deals. The wide zone stuff that they do is probably the toughest thing that I would think at high school level, at least for me as high school coach. The wide zone theories, how good they are at wide zone, is probably the toughest, thing to, if I had to say, try and do in a high school offense. But the more you look at it and the more you watch it, the more you see simple ISO theories, simple, GF counter, using Forrester or Billingsley, using the sniffer Y off tight end as a blocker, bubble screens, stand up pre-snap reads where they're looking at leverage and, they've got a run called one way and a stand up or bubble or, stacked receiver stuff. Just all things to me that all high school offenses without Heisman Trophy winners, without 5-star players, those are all things that if you have guys to get the ball to in space as a coordinator, those are all things that you should be trying to do, because I think the quarterback on a lot of high school teams can make those throws. And then within the run game, I see so many things that are old school, gap block offside and put a sniffer on an inside linebacker. Their wide zone stuff is difficult, in my opinion, at the high school level. But everything else, I mean, if you watch their pin and pull stuff, there's not a ton of center pulls. A lot of it is guard. A lot of it is buck sweep in its truest form. They threw some mesh, which I think probably 90% of high schools nowadays, after watching air raid stuff, I think 90% of high schools probably try to throw mesh. How many versions of flood they have that they get to, a very simple, 1 deep, 2 intermediate, 3 in the flat. How many different versions of that where they switch it up and they'll run wheel concepts where number 1 will run a whip or a return route and be the flat player. 2 will run some type of wheel to be the deep player. 3 will run some type of speed out a sail, 12 to 14 yard action pass and get the back out late to be the flat route, and they'll run post over out. Just so many simple theories that when you look at them and how successful they were, and all the rave now, obviously, that Sarkisian has gotten, and he'll be the Texas coach. And I think he'll do a good job there because he's always been a great offensive coach and a good play caller. But all that stuff that was the rave of how great is this the best offense next to last year's LSU. You're never going to win that debate. Doesn't even matter. It's a waste of time. They were both great offenses. The bigger debate that you should probably have is, is building an offense to score 50 points now a way to win championships? I mentioned this on my YouTube channel sometime last week on a video I did. Defense does not win championships anymore. That old adage of offense sells tickets, defense wins championships, that is out the window. The game has now, you look at the last couple of years, if you're not scoring 40 to 50 a game, you probably don't have a chance. Notre Dame held Alabama to the lowest total all year. That was 31 points, and they lost by 14 points. The game was never close, and they held them to 31, which was the low for the season. So, we're living in a world now where The game has changed. You better change with it. Of all the things I've ever said about Nick Saban, I think the one thing everybody better give him credit for is I think a lot of people would probably think that Nick Saban is too egotistical to change. He's too set in his ways, and it's actually quite the opposite. He has changed. He's 180 degrees from what he used to be. He brought in every philosophy that drives him nuts on defense and every rule that he wanted to get rid of that benefits the offense, and he found a way, probably starting with Kiffin, going through Daboll and Sarkisian, and he found a way to take everything he cannot stand on defense and build it into his offense. He is now okay with giving up 24 to 28 to 35 points a game as long as they're scoring 50. He knows that a certain style of play is going to lead you to give up more points on defense, and he was okay with that. I've seen too many coaches in the last couple of years die on the vine and get fired because they don't want to change their belief in how football should be played. Saban is 100%, it's an adaptation. He learned what he needed to do when he loses, and he learns how to change and bring it into his own offense and his own program. And I think that's what makes him, on top of how good of a motivator he is, how great of a recruiter he is. You got, as an Alabama fan, you got to remember when he came to Alabama, where it was. I don't see how I don't analyze college talent. I'm not a big NFL fan, although living in Jacksonville right now, it's a pretty good time to be an NFL fan. Most mock drafts I see have Ja'Marr Chase ahead of DeVonta Smith. How that is possible, I don't know. If it's because he's 160 pounds soaking wet, maybe. I don't see production value and some intangibles how Ja'Marr Chase is a better player than DeVonta Smith. Maybe they're judging it off of last year when he had Joe Burrow. I don't know, but those guys do it for a living. They analyze drafts and talent for a living. I don't, but I don't agree with a lot of what they do. I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but that's their job, and they know it way better than I do. I'm lucky if I can watch Alabama games live and then go back and study whatever it is I want to study on YouTube or all 22 film, let alone study players. So those guys put in a ton of work. For whatever reason, they see Ja'Marr Chase as a better receiver than DeVonta Smith, and I don't. But there's a lot of mock drafts I saw that before he got hurt had Waddle being taken before DeVonta Smith, and that's because I think people view Waddle as possibly the next Tyreek Hill, if there is another one. I don't know if there is another one. And I think they view, DeVonta Smith as a little bit undersized at 160 pounds to be a standard X or Z or wide out number one on the outside. And I think they probably feel Waddle comes in and gives you instant credibility in your return game. And he gives you instant credibility in the slot, jet sweep, all the different ways to get open that the guys have been using players in the slot. But, it's weird. In mock draft stuff, I've seen DeVonta Smith as the third or fourth receiver taken, which is just, to me, it's absolutely absurd. But I don't know. They do it for a living. I don't. I think, Chris, to be honest with you, I think the rules have a lot to do with that. Besides the RPO stuff and besides when you start looking at everything we're trying to do tackling wise to keep kids healthy and to keep the game of football alive so that it doesn't get banned, the contact time is limited. Keeping the head out of tackles and trying to do everything we can to avoid keeping the head out of tackles, which, then to me, as safe as it is, then sometimes to me compromises the technique of the tackle with your head behind. I I think I think not being able to have as much live contact because of that is obviously it's a great thing to keep kids healthy, but that limited live contact and practice is affecting us now. Um, I think the game is finding a way to be more spatial year in and year out. Obviously tempo has an impact and matchups have an impact, and all those things are now, they're now creating a lot of havoc on defenses, and it's just right now the offense is, for the most part, when it comes down to the best of the best and championship games and playoff games, the offenses are just light years ahead of defenses right now. And normally it's cyclical and that'll change and defenses will catch up and then all of a sudden offenses have to do something else. But you can't look at the results of the last couple of years championship games and tell me that the offenses aren't, that far ahead of defenses right now. And hell, Alabama on defense wasn't very good this year. They struggled. Florida put 48 on them and Ole Miss put 48 or 50 or whatever they put on them. So Alabama wasn't your typical Alabama defense. It's getting harder to play. It's getting harder to do. Trying to find kids that want to play defense. The rules of how we can tackle and how we can hit people are getting crazy. So, I don't know what's going to flip it or change the tide or, reverse this cyclical cycle that we're in right now, but something's got to happen because defense is getting too hard to play. What situation, Greenfield? Yeah, I mean those are pretty good comparisons. I think Waddle's different than Antonio Brown. I don't know. DeVonta Smith's a hard comparison. He's so much smaller than a lot of the guys that are out there now. No, I don't know if Saban. One thing about Saban is he's got a system of how he does things and how he's always done things. I think COVID presented a new scenario. If anything, those schools, they all have the means, the money. I don't know if Alabama had any undue advantage over anybody else with COVID stuff. I don't see that part. No. I don't know who DeVonta Smith is the next. It's hard to kind of call that one because he's built so different. I think Waddle in some people's eyes is the next Tyreek Hill. There is another one. Unsuccessful scheme against a running quarterback. That question why he wasn't doing the same thing. Yeah, but it's interesting. Obviously they went out and got Tua. They went out and got Jalen Hurts, but then they end up with Tua. Now they end up with Mac Jones, who there is no read game at all. It's all RPO and play action pass. Obviously, mobile quarterbacks have hurt them in the past. Tempo has hurt them in the past, and really in essence, people just. The other thing I think people take for granted sometimes is Saban is probably the most studied football coach philosophically, schematically. So everybody in the country is diving, whether they want to beat it or they want to use it. Everybody is diving knee deep into everything Saban does, philosophically, program-wise, schematically. So it's even tougher for him now because it's almost like everybody is studying their scheme to death to figure out what they do, that it makes it a little bit easier to beat. I mean, you look at Lane Kiffin, who was on that staff for a couple of years, and this year at Ole Miss, he gives Alabama everything they wanted and then some. And then in other games, they can't get it out of their own way. I mean, they still had a great year. They scored a lot of points. He's a great offensive mind, a great play caller, but people dial in for that. They take that scheme, because that's the school to beat. They study the Saban scheme inside and out relentlessly and find answers and ways to beat it. And yet he still finds a way to adapt and overcome. It's just, to me, again, though, the biggest point of all, the whole thing to me, outside of being an Alabama fan, is as a head football coach in high school, how the more I watch how directly conducive at what Alabama does is to what we can do in high school. I don't know how much I can agree with you, Haywood. I think it's been a while. If you watch enough games and you watch the communication, I think it's been a while since Saban has called anything. Um, Kirby Smart was calling the defenses for a while. Pete Golding's been calling the last 2 years. If you watch the cameras and you watch enough of the views that you can get, I don't see Saban calling much of anything. I think schematically, obviously, he's fantastic. I think as a motivator, he's fantastic. I think he has a way to get those kids that are the best of the best, and they all have egos, and they all have, they all want the ball. They all have needs, and somehow he gets them all to play. I mean, DeVonta Smith is a gunner on punt. He's if not the first receiver taken, he's going to be a first-round pick. He's a Heisman Trophy winner, and he's the gunner on punt. Their starting two corners, Surtain and Jonathan Job, are on the kickoff team, running down the field and making tackles on kickoff. They've had all the years when they had Josh Jacobs and Damian Harris, and those guys are on kickoff as starting running backs. He gets guys to do things that a lot of other coaches can't seem to get them to do, and to me, that's his biggest sell. That's what makes him who he is. Yeah, not only Oklahoma in full pads, but you used to be able to do Oklahoma 5 days a week, and you would do it every day, and you would do board drills every day, and you would do bull in the ring, and you do a bunch of other things that, heck, as a football coach now, we very rarely, my team this year, I didn't even give practice pants to. We practice in shorts and a girdle every day because the way you're trying to teach kids to tackle nowadays, there's no reason you can't have a full live practice without needing pants or knee pads. There's really not a need for that anymore. If you can block 100%, you can get chest to chest and tackle the way you need to tackle nowadays. The only thing you can't do is you can't go below the waist, so you've got to work on gator roll tackling with dummies and pads and other things. But we went with no practice pants this year, and I don't think it really affected us one bit. If anything, I think our kids were fresher towards the end of the year. I think Saban and Belichick, I think they handle unique problems, which is what makes them different. I don't think either one of them have the means. It's not like Saban could go back and figure out what he's done or what other people have done. It's not like he could ask Belichick what he's done. It's not like either one of them could go back and ask Tom Landry or Don Shula or Darrell Royal or Jimmy Johnson or Barry Switzer what they did. Everything this year within the COVID protocol stuff was things that nobody had ever faced or done before. So not even Saban knew what to do. I just think they're great problem solvers. I think they look at things as a challenge and say, hey, we're going to get through this. It's going to make us better. And then they motivate their kids with it. That's what I think they do best. Well, the biggest analytical thing now in the NFL is running is less efficient than passing. So it's been going that way for a long time, and it's really leaning that way now. With all the analytical data that is studied out there and all the experts that teams hire to study the data, running is less efficient than passing. And now all the new studies and research is out there. NFL teams are finding a way to play with lighter boxes, give the appearance that they can't stop the run because they want the other team to run the ball because it is less efficient, and then doing some things with rotations and coverage and eliminating gaps with fronts. And, that's becoming the new craze that everybody's talking about in football now, because at that level, and I've got an interesting, for high school people, I've got an interesting thought. Haven't thought about how to exactly do it yet, but from that same statistical data, I have an interesting thought. In the NFL, if running is less efficient and you are trying to invite teams to run the ball because it's less efficient, in high school where I am at, and in my 21-year career in high school, passing is way less efficient in high school. Running the ball is what teams want to do. And that's where the efficiency is 95% of the time in high school offenses. So we need to find a way, just like the guys in the NFL are starting to find a way, and the guys in college a little bit are finding a way. We need to find a way to invite people to throw the ball and then figure out what we need to do to get people to throw the ball, and then what we can do to help our coverage or secondary players. What can we do to disguise some looks, to have heavy boxes that then maybe rotate to a deep safety, get people to try to throw the ball into either coverages or just cross your fingers and hope that they can't throw or catch a pass. Like, I have a comment on my side that probably got blocked because it's got a curse in it, but a guy just left a comment. Running's more efficient in high school because kids can't catch passes. Well, that's part of the deal. When I grew up playing baseball, I had baseball coaches that would tell you all the time, you've got way more chance with a ball that's on the ground than you do with a ball that's in the air. A ball that's in the air just has to be caught by one person. A ball that's on the ground has to be fielded, thrown, and caught by another person. Therefore, there are more things in play when you hit a ball on the ground that the other team can screw up, which gives you more chances to get on base. When you hit a ball in the air, if it's in the field of play, only one player on the other team has to catch it. So, it's like they say in football all the time, when you throw the ball, 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad, something along those lines. So it's just one of those deals where you've got to look at it and say, okay, if the NFL and colleges, if they're all using statistical data, computer-driven data, analytics to figure out how they need to play football, we ought to do the same thing in high school. And when you look at the analytics of high school, 95% of the games, you are going to see 80% runs, if not 85% runs. Now, the biggest problem we have in high school is, much like everybody talks about Alabama having all these 5 stars and they have so much talent, that's why they win. The talent differential in high school is 100 times different than it is in college. Ohio State has 5 stars. They have almost as many 5 stars. In high school, you're going into games where there might be a team that's got 4 to 5 Division I players on it playing against a team that won't have a kid play college football. That, to me, is such a drastic differentiation in talent that there's almost nothing you can do schematically to make up for that. But if throwing the ball is a little bit less effective, if we can somehow if you can somehow figure out a way to get teams to throw the ball, and then not be in straight press zero every down, but give a heavy box look that gets them to throw the ball, but you're playing some zone style coverages with some deep help, that to me would statistically be the way to play. It's like when Kevin Kelly at Pulaski Academy in Arkansas, all the stuff he does that everybody says is irrational or it's crazy because guys in the NFL don't do it. But Kevin Kelly, everything he does is based on statistical analytical data. It's based on the probability of getting, going forward and getting it on 4th down. It's based on the probability of recovering onside kicks. It's based on the probability if you don't recover an onside kick, what is the probability from that yard line that the other team's going to score a touchdown? Everything that he does has been motivated by, empirical data and analytics driven decisions. He's not just some guy out there going, hey, I coach high school football. Let's throw caution to the wind. I'll do whatever I want like I'm playing Madden. That's not what he's doing. He's using analytics and data to change the way the game and the decision-making process is being made. And he's had a hell of a lot of success doing it, to the point where some college and NFL guys go seek his counsel on certain things. The difference is, in the NFL, when there's press conferences after every game and you're making millions of dollars and you decide onside kick 3 times and you don't get it, you've got to answer that in the press conference Kevin Kelly doesn't have to answer that question in a major press conference. If you decide to go for it on 4th down from your own 20-yard line, you got to answer that in a press conference. Kevin Kelly usually does not. So the biggest difference between those guys understanding why somebody like Kevin Kelly is different and an enigma in the coaching profession, but then doing some of the things he's doing, even though they are data driven, they can't do those things because every decision they make is going to be hammered, 9 million times over, going for it, faking a punt. That stuff's going to be looked at. When games are close in the NFL, that 1 or 2 decisions that you make will be played over and over and over again 1,000 times in the media, but they won't go back and look at missed tackles. They won't go back and look at the 80 other plays that happened in the game that had a lot to do with the game being a 1-score or a 3-point or a 2-point game. They're going to look at the one time you went for it on 4th and 2 from the 50, or they're going to look at why you did an onside kick or why you did onside kick. They're just going to look at the most glaring features of the game that stand out to everybody. They're going to look at your game management with timeouts and the most obvious things that jump out at the audience and the reporters. That's what they're going to talk about. They're not going to go behind the scenes to look at all the other things that go on, to figure out that there were 50 other plays that had a bigger impact on the game than that one. But they're going to look at that one because that's what they're trained to do. So we don't see forwards very much either, but we're a too high shelf, but we don't see a lot of forwards. Most of the time, I would say we try to be 60-40 run to pass, depending on our personnel. It's something that obviously as an offensive coordinator, I would tell you 100% I'd love to be 50-50. If I could be 50-50, that's the best of every world. I don't have tendencies. There's nothing you can lean on. If I can be 50-50, obviously I'll have some down and distance tendencies, but the more you go 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, either side, run or pass, you start to build tendencies. So 50-50 is the goal. 60-40 for me, run to pass is about where I would love to live, depending on the score of the game is going to have a lot to do with that too. You go in with a game plan, 60-40 run to pass, and you're down 14-0 a couple minutes in. Your game plan, your play calling might change a little bit. So, not 2 minutes into the game, but you start to get into the second quarter towards halftime and you're down 14-0, 21-0, that 60-40 run to pass is going to change. So I agree with you 100%, Coach Greenfield. I'm in Florida and I don't see anybody that really wants to make a true living throwing the ball. And if I do, they are throwing shots down the field, jump balls, up balls. I don't see a lot of teams that have a sophisticated drop back passing game that has progressions and a quick game and a screen game. I don't see any teams that live by that, to be honest with you. We see almost none of it. I wouldn't be able to get the job of the person that gives water to the guy that runs the offense at Alabama. I don't know if I'd be even qualified to chart the plays for the offense at Alabama. Appreciate your insight. Haywood Jablomi is a classic name. I appreciate it as well. Yeah, the even better thing, Chris, is with all these $12 million contracts is you can get fired and get paid the next 3 or 4 years. So, guys like Gus Malzahn are now sitting at home, 30 days after he got fired, they owed him $21 million in guaranteed money. And guys like Will Muschamp are still getting paid. And, you had Charlie Weiss, who was getting paid by 2 or 3 different schools at the same time. So not only if you onside kick or go for it on 4th down and they fire you, not only will you, make $12 million more than everybody else in the world, but you might make it for 2 or 3 more years. That's why these contracts take so long. That's why the Urban Meyer deal with Jacksonville takes so long. They're ironing out every detail to make sure that he's taken care of, and that's what all these coaches and agents do now. And I feel bad for these college teams because they end up with guys that can't get it done, and then you try to get rid of them, and then you get rid of him, and you're stuck paying him and the next coach coming in because these contracts are negotiated in such a bizarre way with these buyouts. I mean, I don't know that many other jobs. Like, I wish there was a teacher buyout. Not that we make a ton of money, but I wish there was a teacher buyout that said within the first 3 or 4 years, if you don't get the results statewide testing or whatever, and your principal fires you, they have to be out the next 5 years of your contract and pay you, $180,000 the next 5 years. There's no buyout in teaching. There's no, there's, there's some compensation in jobs and things, but there's severance packages, but it's not a severance package like making $23 million guaranteed in the next 30 days. There's no severance package like that. I count screens as passes, so I wouldn't. When I say 60-40 run, I mean, 60 design runs, 40 design passes. Now, where that number got hard the last couple of years to keep track of is everything when I was calling the offense 2 years ago, I didn't call it this past year, but when I was calling the offense, almost everything I did was an RPO. So, and I'm talking about mostly post-snap RPOs, throwing off second and third level defenders, not leverage screens or stand-up screens. I'm talking about post-snap RPOs with meshes. So, it's one of those deals that with RPOs now, you're calling, runs that could be passes. So you may be calling what you think is 60-40, but once you start charting that, if your quarterback is pulling it or if the defense is making your quarterback pull it more often than not, now all of a sudden you're not 60-40 anymore. So that changed for me a little bit. The Urban Meyer hype in Florida is beyond real. The Urban Meyer hype in Jacksonville it's probably crazier now than it was maybe when they announced the franchise or when they first got the franchise. It's about as crazy growing up in New York. It's about as crazy as anything I've seen, between, all the things that I grew up with the Yankees and, all the things Mark Messier coming and winning a Stanley Cup with the Rangers, the Islanders winning 4 cups in a row, Jets and Giants, Knicks and Nets. I haven't seen many things like this in a long, long time. It is bizarre that one guy with so many issues can cause such a commotion. But I think we live in a society now where winning is really all that matters anymore. So you can take Urban Meyer's health issues. You can take the fact that Urban Meyer is going to tell you about culture when he had probably the worst locker room of all time in maybe college football history. You can take all those things into consideration and throw them out the window because he wins. So he could quit in 2 days from the Jags. He could quit in 2 months. He could cite health problems whenever he wants to cite health problems. Nobody cares right now because he is a proven winner. He's the biggest splash hire Jacksonville has ever made in their franchise history. He's the name that's relatable, that people know. And the people are chomping at the bit right now. Season tickets are going to go off. It might look like a waiting list like the Green Bay Packers. Season ticket list sales are going to go through the roof. And the fact that you're sitting on Trevor Lawrence, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, pretty much the top pick in every round all the way through the draft, and 70 to 90 or whatever the hell million they have in salary space and salary cap stuff. He took the job for a reason. It's the perfect job for him right now. It was very much calculated. You've got to understand that he's been talked to, he's been talked to by NFL teams for the last 2 years. For a fact he was talked to by the Cowboys last year. It had to be the right job, and this is 100% the right job. I am not sold on it yet because, I'm a little bit more old school maybe in my beliefs. I need to see that he's going to be here for longer than 2 years. He had a hard time losing 1 game a year in college. How's he going to lose 8 to 10? although in his press conference today, he said that the NFL is a 60% league. Some of the best to ever do it in coaching were only 600%, win to loss guys. So it's a different league, and he understands that. So if he can get that through his ego and past his ego, then maybe he will be okay. But when you're having a hard time losing one game a year and now you're going to lose 8, I need to see that that's real. I need to see that you're not going to back out in 2 years and say that it's health, I'll never coach again. There's been 2 different times in his career where he has said, I'll never coach again, or I've coached my last game. And 2 years later, he's back again. Now, I get it. Why? I mean, yeah, it's a lot of money. I get it. I understand it. Just, to me, be better about how you word things. And, when you leave somewhere, just say, hey, look, right now I'm out. I'm going to go do some other things, and who knows what the future holds, but the Urban Meyer situation in Jacksonville right now is the epitome of where we are in society. Throw out all the negatives, throw out everything you want. When you win games, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what your character is. It doesn't matter. We're going to throw out there all these things about leadership, accountability, culture. They're all great buzzwords. Everybody loves them. When you win, all that stuff goes out the window. You can do whatever you want because you're winning. When you lose, all those things become the reason why you're losing. You have no culture. You have no accountability. You have no leadership. Most locker rooms have problems. You just don't hear about them when teams are winning. That's pretty much the bottom line. I've been in locker rooms my whole life. I've been around it my whole life. Never at their level, obviously, but the bottom line is winning hides everything. And you look at the track record of what he's done and where he's been, and arguably you could say that maybe there's not a lot of culture, maybe there's not a lot of accountability, but that's what he preaches, that's what he sells, and people buy it. Winning, people buy it from winning guys. I made a comment to somebody today. When's the last time you heard the term row the boat? Like, I honestly want to know the last time you really heard RTB row the boat. I didn't hear very much of it this year. I didn't hear a whole lot of it last year. But when PJ Fleck was the hot name, ESPN and everybody else, it was row the boat, row the boat, row the boat, row the boat. And I haven't heard it recently. Is that because PJ Fleck can't coach? No. Is that because row the boat is a bad idea? No. It's because at Minnesota, he hasn't had the immediate success like he did his last. It's just something else to talk about. Remember, and everybody still has them. I get it, but remember, like when a turnover chain was a big deal, and then the University of Miami became the laughing stock of college football because they've got these elaborate turnover chains. So to me, as somebody who's in the business doing it every day, yeah, culture is a great thing. I think you need to build it. But if you don't win, I don't care if you're Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, PJ Fleck. If you don't win, all your ideas go out the window. E plus R equals nothing if you don't win. Yeah, I don't care about the book. I don't care about the any of that stuff. The reason right now people will buy into what Urban Meyer wants to do, and players with the Jags right now might buy into what Urban Meyer wants to do, is because he's a winner. He's a proven winner. As soon as those guys don't buy into what he wants to do, they're going to be removed from the team. Until you don't have success, and then nobody's going to buy into what you want to do, no matter, regardless of whether you're Urban Meyer or Nick Saban. If you don't have success doing it, they're not buying it. I'm 48 years old, started playing football when I was 6. So I've been around a game of football for about 42 years. I don't know if I've heard the word culture around a football program in the first 30-something years of me being involved in football. We never really talked about culture in college. We never talked about any of those things because, being a football player had certain unwritten rules that if you wanted to be successful, you had to do these things. Well, now we've got to talk about it and teach it. And culture is like this buzzword, and there's people getting paid millions of dollars to be like a culture coach. Whatever happened to just doing the things you needed to do to succeed? And that's what made you a football player. So like sometimes I get freaked out with all this culture and accountability. And I mean, shit, we were doing that 35 years ago. It's just nobody called it culture. So that's the weird part to me about it, is everybody's going to talk about Urban Meyer has a certain way of doing things, and and it's workmanlike, and shit, you got 28 guys getting arrested and mass murderers on your team, or at least one murderer on your team, and that's a culture. No, you're winning games. That's the culture, so I'm not sold yet. I think it's great for the town. I think it's great. Jacksonville is now a national news story with ESPN, and the NFL Network covered the Urban Meyer press conference today. They haven't had that in years. So it's awesome for the city. It's awesome for the franchise. But I am not buying it yet. I'll still root for the Jags. I'll be a Jags fan. But I'm not all in, and I'm not buying it until I see it. I don't know if Mike Leach will get it going in the SEC, to be honest with you, Boomer Sooner. I think all the things we talked about with Nick Saban and how he's adapted things, until Mike Leach learns to adapt, I don't know if he's ever going to get it wrong. I think he'll be a great news story. I think he'll be he'll be the funniest guy to follow week in and week out. He'll give some amazing interviews. They'll throw the ball for 1 million yards. I don't dislike Mike Leach at all. I just think he's got to come to a realization sooner or later that he's got to take the things he does and the things he knows how to do, and he's got to not change them. He's just got to mold them and morph them with some other things to win football games. Did you hear about Row the Boat in a news story or something nationally, or you just happen to read something about it? And I have no idea what UFC's first fight is. He'll still be, whether he gets it going or not, he'll still be one of the most entertaining guys on the planet in the business. And having him and Lane Kiffin in Mississippi together is media gold. But he's going to have to do something different. Could be worse, though. You could have Willie Taggart. What else we got going on out there? Talked a little bit today, did a video today about RPOs and isolation RPOs, and I was shocked at how many isolation RPOs Alabama was running. And then I realized, I kind of realized why they were doing it. Not only because of obviously the RPO game for them was huge because of their receivers and because that's what Mac Jones does. He's not a runner. But they built a lot of their play action stuff off of the RPOs. So they would RPO. They would RPO the isolation stuff, and then when they would start to see more man and robber concepts, with or one rat type stuff, where you had, man to man underneath with a low hole cut player and a high hole cut player, and taking the conflict away from defenders so you don't get RPO'd, they would run the same schemes and throw play action passes because their isolation scheme is essentially a half slide pass protection with run blocking rules. So they would come back and run the same ISO theory with pass blocking demeanor. And it would look just like all their RPOs, and then they would run their double moves off it and throw the ball down the field off it. So, it's actually simplistic in nature, and The more I went back and looked at it, the more I went back and looked at it, the more I realized that it was actually pretty simple stuff they were doing, and then Sarkisian would just window dress it with formations and motions. Yeah, obviously now that he's at Texas, he's going to run his offense and call the plays at Texas, so they're going to have the ability to run everything Alabama did. It's just a matter of, can it be, it won't be as successful right away until they get those kind of players, but it will certainly be successful because you don't get guys open by 8 to 10 yards in national championship games without being good schematically. So Sarkisian's always been good. USC, Washington, he's been a great play caller everywhere he's ever been. So yes, he'll bring that with him to Texas, and yes, Texas will be fun to watch. I just don't know the results that he's going to get right away. Someone said it at work. That's interesting. I don't even know if I've heard it on ESPN this year one time. 2 years ago, you couldn't go a day without seeing RTB or, reading something, whatever it is. Quarterback ISO RPO out of 10 personnel. Anything out of 10 personnel that's quarterback run is a pain in the ass. You gotta figure out whether to defend 10 personnel sets or 20 personnel sets, because quarterback runs make it 20 personnel. But if they're in 2x2, 3x1, you got to figure, that if they're in 2x2, 3x1, you got to defend 10 personnel sets. But when you defend 10 personnel sets, you don't always have the bodies to fit lead, ISO, power, counter runs. So now you got to determine, do you want to have the box to fit those runs, which leaves you a little bit compromised in coverage, or do you want to cover those sets and now you're compromising quarterback runs? So what you usually end up with is coverage with D-line stunts to eliminate gaps to make the ball go where you want it to go. Just about anything you run can be RPO'd. I agree with that. You just got to be careful with how you do it. There's a lot of schemes that are way better and way more protective on the quarterback when you run them. The biggest thing is you got to figure out, you can't just RPO to RPO. You got to figure out who the conflict defender is, what his run fit is, what his pass coverage is, and then off of the mesh, figure out how to get the ball there. You can't just RPO and pick a guy and say, okay, we're going to run double post, read the Mike linebacker. If it has nothing to do with his coverage, the RPO is worthless. But if you can run a scheme, you can probably RPO it. Yeah, they'll go back to double moves. They'll go to sluggo off the glance and some different things off of that, because one of the things that shuts down or at least eliminates RPOs is man-man coverage. So a lot of teams play more man when they're seeing RPOs. But as an offense, if you can dictate the coverage the defense is in, you're already winning that battle. So for them to play man defense to stop RPOs, you're kind of winning the battle as an offensive coordinator, because now it's a chess game. It's a constant chess game. Rich Rod didn't get enough time at Michigan, A, because he wasn't a Michigan man, and B, Rich Rod is a lot tougher than people think, even though he's a spread tempo guy. Rich Rod's best teams at West Virginia were very, very hardcore, very physical, and at that time, Michigan wasn't ready to deal with that. The players they had on the roster weren't ready to deal with that, so it took him a year or two to build that into his program, and by year 3, they're turning the corner a little bit, and he just didn't get enough time. So I don't know. Texas has got so many other underlying problems there, with other things that are going on politically and some other things. So they've got some bigger deals than just football, but I would think if he can keep his nose out of trouble and stay sober, I would think he's got a great chance. He's going to put together a great staff of all guys that know how to recruit. Texas recruits itself. I think the University of Texas is still an easy sell as a coach to recruit. And if I was recruiting in Texas, I would be asking all those kids, hey, Oklahoma's been doing it the last 8-10 years without you. Wouldn't you like to be part of a group that comes to Texas and gets it back to where it was? Because usually in Texas, if you're if you're going to be recruited by Texas, you're probably going to be recruited by Oklahoma, maybe Alabama. But I'd be kind of using. I wouldn't be negatively recruiting Oklahoma, but I would be using a logic to say, hey, look, man, they've been winning Big 12 titles. And if you go there, you're just another cog in the wheel winning a Big 12 title. We're trying to turn this thing around. If you go here and turn this thing around, you'll be legendary. You'll be remembered forever in Texas. So that's how I'd be recruiting it or selling it. How much will being head coach as well as play caller affect Sark's offense? I don't think it affects it at all. I think it'll affect his head coaching a little bit more than it affects his play calling. I think there'll be some other things as a head coach maybe that he doesn't take care of or doesn't give enough time to because he's game planning and doing some other things. But I think it's a matter of finding the right guys, finding a trigger man, finding linemen. He's not going to forget how to coach. He's not going to – you just watch one of the most masterful game call, play calling game plans of all time in a big-time game. He's not going to forget how to do that. It's just going to be a matter of if he can get the right people to do it and how long did they give him to do it. But to me, somebody like Sark, it's just a matter of can you get out of your own way, and that's a big-time stressful job. You have a history of, messing with the bottle a little bit, and glad for him that he's cleaned it up and he stayed sober. And, I as an Alabama fan, I wish him the best, but just as a football fan, I wish him the best because I think he's a really great mind. I think he's great to study. And I think Texas being good again is good for football. So I hope he gets it going. I wonder how hard it would be for the Alabama team to understand the new offense. Well, they do it every year, Haywood. So, yeah, it's always going to be hard. But, I mean, shoot, they've gone from – every year they lose either coordinators or position coaches, and every year they just come back and kind of reload. I mean, it's within the last 5 years, they've had Kiffin, Brian Daboll, and Sarkisian in 3 years. They've gone from Kirby Smart to Pete Golding. It's at Alabama. It's the turnover for everybody that wants. See you, Chris. The turnover for Alabama that everybody wants their guys. Everybody wants Saban guys. They either want to know what Saban does or they want to bring them on board to try and beat Saban. So he goes through it every year. The turnover is insane. And he's going to go out and find what he thinks is the best available, and he seems to do a pretty good job. So, well, imagine if Leach would just do the things that Lincoln Riley does because Lincoln Riley is actually a run and shoot an air raid guy. So Lincoln Riley is an air raid guy that adjusted his air raid routes to do some other things, and look how good he is. And Mike Leach is that smart. If he would do that, he'd be just as good as Lincoln Riley. But I think there's a part of Mike Leach that likes being Mike Leach. He's kept his name in the spotlight, being an enigma, being a riddle, being different. And he's almost, if you think about it, Mike Leach is probably he's probably either ahead of the curve, really smart, or really dumb. Because if you think about it, he actually has put winning on the back burner to keep Mike Leach, the character, and Mike Leach, the storyline, at the top of everybody's mind. So when jobs come open, he's always there, even though he's not doing anything great. He didn't go to Washington State and win titles. He didn't go to Texas Tech and win titles. He's done a lot of good things, but how he plays and who he is in the media has kept his name at the forefront. And because he's been at some place, your best bet is not going to be winning as many games as possible. Your best bet is going to be this character that stays at the forefront of people's minds that programs are going to want when they need a spark or a kick in the ass. It's going to be a better bet than going to try and beat Oregon or going to try and beat Texas. And I think that's kind of what he does. Because if he really wanted to win, he's probably one of the smartest guys in the business. If he really wanted to win, he would change. And Lincoln Riley's the perfect guy to look at because he's an air raid guy. In the same clinic talk that a lot of teams are moving to a two-trap scheme. I've heard trap coverage, which I thought was like a zone scheme, but meant to look. I think trap coverage can be taken a lot of different ways. Sometimes two-trap means you're playing a too high look with off corners, kind of like the two read defense, but then your corners sit and trap the flat. So you're trying to bait the offensive coordinator into running quick game routes, throwing the ball into the flat. You're keeping two high safeties to kind of be a little bit safer on the back end, not give up four verticals. And so two trap can be looked at a lot of different ways. I don't necessarily know if it's two man as much, but what are you saying, Jake, about against our to defend RPOs? I don't know. I don't know how much. Obviously, guys have tried to make some coverage adjustments, but any zone coverage you play, spot drop or pattern match, is going to be susceptible to RPOs because you're going to have somebody along the line that might be tied to a run fit and a pass drop. And that's the thing that makes RPOs work. So that's the issue that teams are facing. So what's going on more to defend the RPOs on top of man coverage is you're seeing different box and creative box looks and then creative defensive line play to eliminate things but then the stunts and the things that they're doing up front are accounting for that in the run game. To me, that's about the only way people have been able to stop RPO stuff when the 10 even, or depending on depending on the run schemes that you're up a little bit in the RPO game, and he's not fully protected on some pull schemes like counter and power and dart and some things like that. So some of those offensive run schemes that teams want to use the RPO, I think those schemes allow the quarterback to get hit a little bit more. Like when, I don't fully agree with it, but when John Gruden talked about, RPOs mean ridiculous protection offense, there is a little bit of a point to that with some schemes. But again, I think Alabama's isolation RPOs this year did a really good job, knowing that Mac Jones is not very mobile. They did a really good job with an RPO scheme that is very similar to pass protection in nature, so that they could keep Mac Jones clean and on his feet. I don't know if it's the money. Just recently, obviously Brent Venables has always been a hot name, and he's got a son that's playing with him now, so that's one of the reasons. Maybe he never wanted to be a head coach. That's another reason. But I think now you're starting to see the Clemson guys heat up. You got to remember, Chad Morris left. I believe Jeff Scott or one of the other co-offensive coordinators there's left. I think now Clemson is just now at the point where they're being considered within the last 3 to 5 years in the if you're a Michigan fan, Jason, then I don't know, you may want to hear this or you may not. This could be a hot take. It could be I don't think it's controversial at all, but to get back to that level, I think they need to make a coaching change, personally. If they don't make a coaching change, then I think they need to play a brand of football that is more conducive to how people are winning. I think Michigan needs to go out and get some spread athletes. I think they need to get a really good dual threat trigger man. I think maybe they need to mix in some tempo. I think they need to try and, just like Saban did, I think they need to try and buy into the fact that football is now an offensive game, and let's sell ourselves out to make it that way. So that's just my opinion. But to be really honest with you, I think they might need a change at the top. Actually, Haywood, I'm only going to be on. You can use the bathroom. I don't control your bathroom privileges, but I'm only going to be on for a couple more minutes. So. Yeah, obviously he was with Belichick, and you could trace that all back there. But Belichick, Saban, and everybody else from that time till now have changed 180 degrees. Because he was in the NFL, he will tell you when you study Ripley's match coverage. Saban will tell you it's because of the NFL and guys like Dan Marino. That's why they got out of country cover three and started playing Ripley's match which has man rules built into a zone defense. So they've all changed because the game has changed. The Belichick, Saban, Browns defense and the Alabama, New England defense now, there's a lot of things that are different. A lot that are the same, but there's a lot that's different. I'm going to agree, maybe to disagree, Ross. I think it's probably harder to get those type of athletes, but I think you have to, and I think this is also part of the problem they had with Rich Rod when he went there. I don't know if everybody wants that. As much as they want to win, I don't know if Michigan people want that. And if you make that change, it's going to take you a while to recruit to that. And obviously, you look at like Scott Frost. Scott Frost is having a little bit of an issue right now, but I don't think it's so much those schools can't get those guys. I think they just have to be able to do something successfully to convince guys to want to go there. Because I just don't know if old school Michigan football is how you're going to compete for national championships. I don't see it with the dudes Ohio State's getting, and now, recruiting wise, Michigan's now become, the only good thing for them is Michigan State's taking a hit, but Michigan's now becoming third, fourth, fifth fiddle in the Big Ten. So I don't see how they're getting back anytime soon. Yeah, Jake, I think what I've seen more of is more of a move to post-snap mesh RPOs where the ball is actually going in the running back's stomach and not just a, quick pop read of a linebacker. He drops, I then put the ball out so the running back takes it like stick draw. I think you're seeing more now. A lot of people are still running the stick concept with RPOs. They're just doing it with a run first mentality, but also with a mesh first mentality to get people. I think what they were finding was when you're running stick draw and you're running it off of a punch one or a quarterback drop, you're less likely to give the draw, you're more likely to give the draw than you are to throw the ball because you are constantly giving pass looks first. The RPO stuff makes it 50-50 on giving and throwing because you're actually meshing with a back while you're making the read. You're not raising up to possibly throw stick. Defense drops, and now you present the ball to your tailback. So, the old way of the stick draw stuff and stuff like that, I think the ball actually ended up being given maybe more than it was thrown simply because when the quarterback would raise up to throw the stick, people would drop, and that would be the indicator for him to give the draw. That's what made that such a good theory. But now the RPOs are more, let me stick this in the back stomach, watch what that guy's doing, and throw off of it. It's really option football on steroids, and if you do it correctly versus the right structures of defense, you should never be wrong. The only way you should be wrong is if you throw a bad ball, don't block somebody and get sacked, or drop the ball. But the read, it's an option theory. You're throwing the ball where a guy can't be in two places at once. So if he can't help the run and drop in the pass, you should never be wrong. So that's what makes it so interesting, and it fits tempo perfect. That's the reason, Jake, to be honest with you, I think those all have fallen off because, they were pass looks first, which caused everybody to drop, and they ended up and getting 4, 5, 6 yard gains. The thing about RPOs now is not only are you helping eliminate guys from the box, but the pass part of the RPO is what is becoming so explosive. And I think because they wanted to throw the ball off the RPOs, they decided to go with mesh theories as opposed to raise up throw theories, because each one, when you raise up and throw, you're going to be more likely to hand the ball off. When you stick it in somebody's stomach and ride, there's a way higher probability of you throwing the ball because the defense sees the mesh in the stomach and they see run schemes from the O-line. So that's why I think you've seen that kind of fall off the face of the earth. I don't think it's unfair. I mean, I don't think it's, I think those guys have to, I think those guys have to do everything they can to catch up to what Saban's doing. I think the hard part is the facility. You match a guy like Saban with the facilities at Alabama. Alabama has the best of everything to get what they need, and Clemson has matched that now, and some other people are trying to match that. But I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can say it's unfair. And it's not Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is not anything great in the NFL anymore. He's a great coach, but he's not a world beater in the NFL anymore. But we're going on about an hour and 20 minutes now, guys. So I appreciate you guys being here tonight. Been putting out some more YouTube videos now that the season's over, so make sure you check that out. If you ever want me to do a video on a certain topic, if I can do it, I'd more than gladly do it. But thanks for joining me tonight. Thanks for everything you guys do for Play Fast Football. Stay safe out there. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Do everything you need to do. And I appreciate what you guys did tonight. Thanks for being on a Friday night. Don't know if I can do a video on Notre Dame, Haywood. I'll think about it, though. But thanks for being on tonight. Thanks for everything you guys do. And I will catch you next time.